So this session was pre-recorded by our speakers, Eliana Kobayashi and professor at the Federal Institution of Education, Science and Technology of Sao Paulo, and Sandra Gattoli, professor at Universidad Federal de São Carlos in Brazil.
We are both presenters, Eliana Kobayashi, who is my colleague from the Federal Institute of São Paulo, and me, Sandra Regina Butros Gattolin, from the Federal University of São Carlos. Both of us are speaking from São Paulo, Brazil. Okay, those are us, me, and Eliana Kobayashi, and this is the organization of our presentation. I'll start with an introduction and try to contextualize the study, show you the objective of this presentation, give you some information on methods and materials, and then Eliana is going to talk about the results of this investigation. Okay, so times have changed, society has changed, students have changed a lot. They are not the same as they were some years ago, yes, and nowadays they seem to be much more independent than they were before, regardless their age. As Calantes has pointed out, young people today have changed their attitudes and are not content with the passivity that was usual for them some time ago. So they prefer to be actors to audience. They prefer to be involved, to be engaged in the actions, in all the actions, including what happens at school, what happens in the classroom. Here we have two different images just to show two different classrooms, and these classrooms are not, none of them refers to a pastime. Both of them are contemporary classrooms. Yeah, so we can see that we still have traditional approaches, teachers who use more traditional methodologies, ways of teaching, and others who are more engaged, who try to involve their students in the actions, in everything which happens and in the classroom, including the decisions we have to make to give a meaning to the process of learning and teaching a foreign language. Yeah, so if this happens during classes, it is very contradictory to aim at the students' autonomy without allowing the discussion on the use of assessment instruments that also provide a more autonomous performance. So what do I mean? I mean that teachers have been giving their students more autonomy, more possibility to engage in the decisions, in the process of learning and teaching, and they are also, it is also fair to give students the opportunity to share ideas and decisions about assessment. Yes, so there are many, of course, many assessment instruments we know, and in this presentation, we are going to focus on self-assessment, which is, like any other assessment instrument, can be used for different purposes and may, for example, be restricted to the scope of analysis of one's knowledge and skills, or as a way to optimize time and cost to identify the level of proficiency of the subject. Just 1 minute. Yeah. Okay. This study brings a different proposal from the self-assessment studies, which from the ones which are found in Brazil and also in other countries. It is observed that research tends to focus on the use of self-assessment instruments in one of these two spectrums: development-oriented self-assessment and performance-oriented self-assessment. So these are the two spectrums which are generally used, generally focused when we are talking about or using self-assessment. So about these two different spectrums, the development-oriented self-assessment is related to the learning process, which also includes studies related to self-assessment and autonomy. So this is more processual. And the performance-oriented self-assessment relates to those investigations that correlate self-assessment with other formal assessment instruments, such as proficiency tests, teacher assessment, or peer assessment. Okay. As for performance-oriented self-assessment, in this kind of assessment, the student or candidate assess their level of English or another foreign language according to established criteria, assigning grades to themselves or classifying their performance according to scales or parameters. The grade in this study, the grade in this study is used for reasons similar to Lee's in his investigation of self-assessment in an English and Korean program. So Lee says, grades were specifically chosen to identify the relationship between teachers' grades and student self-assessment scores. The comparison of grades allows us to verify if the students were able to assign grades similar to those to the teachers. Besides, added to this, in this work, the self-assessment grades aim to promote the autonomy of the students who starts to participate in their assessment process, which was previously totally centered on the teacher. So the performance-oriented self-assessment was chosen so that students could participate in grading themselves together with the teacher. So the objective of this presentation is to share the results of an investigation on self-assessment, which aim to better understand how high school students see self-assessment in English language and analyze the correlation between the English language, self-assessment, and their scores in achievement tests. The research which was conducted was the type of a case study, yes, which is an investigation of an example in action. That is, this kind of case study enables the analysis of the action in the context in which it takes place. A mixed methodology with qualitative and quantitative analysis was used. And where did this happen? The research was conducted in a high school class of a public school located near São Paulo, in São Paulo state, where the English language is mandatory in every year of the course and has a workload of 100 minutes per week. 37 students participated in this study, and questionnaires were applied in order to, first of all, identify students' perceptions and opinions on self-assessment, and also to know how they assess their language skills in the English subject. Now, Eliana, the floor is yours so that you can continue with the results of this study.
Okay, thank you, Sandra. So now we're going to discuss the main results of our work. Firstly, let's see the students' perceptions and opinions on self-assessment based on the questionnaire applied before the application of the self-assessment tools. 8% of the students had already done self-assessment in school. Students' view on self-assessment can be classified in three main categories: general, limited, and specific views. General is related to more generic views on some aspects of the assessment. 65% of students' answers could be classified in this category. For example, according to one student, self-assessment is the assessment of people's behavior, learning, and dedication done by themselves. On the other hand, limited views, with 26.5%, are concerned about self-report, but with certain objectives. Here, self-assessment aims to identify positive and negative aspects which must be improved. For instance, the act of recognizing the acquired knowledge about some subject and realize which aspect you need to improve. And the specific view, with 6.5% of the students. A specific category is related to a wider view on self-assessment. Criteria are included. As it was described by one student, assess oneself using some criteria in order to improve what can be improved. When asked about the positive aspects of the self-assessment, students mentioned, first, promote development, with 33.5% of students. With self-assessment, I can see my development and use the self-assessment to improve my English. Second, identify problems and difficulties, 23.5% of students. According to them, they could identify their difficulties to be helped. The third type is to promote reflection and self-confidence. 13.5% of the students. One example is, self-assessment, would be good to think about why you learn English and your level. 16.5% of students believe self-assessment can help the teacher to become more accurate. For instance, the teacher doesn't know how much students have dedicated before a presentation. She can assess only what was presented, and with the self-assessment, the student can consider it. And 10% of students relate self-assessment to grade themselves. Students may work hard and grade themselves sincerely on their performance to motivate them somehow to keep studying. So we can see that students mention many positive aspects. It's possible to infer they would like to take part in their own assessment. Students were also asked to point out possible negative aspects of self-assessment. 30% of them mentioned experiencing negative feelings, which could be caused by self-assessment. One student said, "Notes that I'm not good at something that I thought I was may hurt, but it will pass." Or, "Get anxious," wrote another student. 26.5% also claimed that they may not know how to do self-assessment. According to the student, sometimes we may not know where our mistake is. 26.5% pointed to the possibility of lying. Students can lie in self-assessment and get a grade without deserving it. Also, 16.5% of the students did not answer this question, or the answer was not clear. Although there are some negative aspects, such as anxiety and lack of confidence, they may be connected to the fact that objectives and criteria are not clear to the students. So they must be carefully explained before any self-assessment. The self-assessment tool. The questionnaire main objective was to promote reflection in students' learning. The content and the skills expected to be developed in the term were the base of all the questions. The students were also expected to classify the given statements according to the Likert scale. Here we have some of the questions and answers. For example, 3% of the students disagree with the statement, "I can describe past events or finished actions in the past," while 14% neither agree nor disagree, and 41% strongly agree. About the statement, "I can distinguish facts from opinions" in letters to the editor, 84% of the students strongly agree, and 16% agree. "I can write newspaper headlines." It means I know the rules to do it. 11% of the students neither agree nor disagree. 19% agree, and 70% strongly agree. After finishing the self-assessment, after finishing the questionnaire, students were asked to rate themselves on a scale 1 to 10 based on the expected development. These scores were then compared to the achievement test scores, written test, and oral presentation using the t-test. The written test had reading, grammar, and vocabulary questions, and the oral presentation was a group work who discussed about one of the main topics discussed in class. Student self-assessment accounted for 10% of their final mark. Now comparing the scores. The written test mean was around 6.5 and the standard error 0.34. The self-assessment mean was 8.6 with standard error 0.109. So the mean difference between the two variables was minus 2.08. The t statistic here is quite large and negative, minus 6.12, which correlates to a very small significance value of 0.000. The significance level here is 0.05. Therefore, evaluating our t-test, we would reject the null hypothesis, which says that there is no significant difference between the two mean scores. Actually, we found out evidence that the difference between the two scores is statistically significant. Now, the oral presentation mean was around 7.6 and the self-assessment mean was 8.6. The mean difference between the two variables was minus 1.04 and the t-statistic was minus 5.8 that correlates to the significance value of 0.00. Again, the significance level here is 0.05. So it's less than 0.001. Again, the significance level here showed that is less than 0.05. Consequently, there is enough evidence to reject again the null hypothesis, as the results suggest that the difference between the two scores is statistically significant. Now, the comparison of the highest and the lowest in scores in the achievement tests. Let's observe here the tables. The self-assessment scores, we can see that in some cases they are higher than the achievement test. That also suggests some attendance. Students with the highest scores in both tests, written and oral, tend to self-assess with lower scores. As we can see here, for instance, student 4 got 10 in written tests, 10 oral presentation, self-assessment, got a 9. Student 3 got 9, 8.5, and 8. And student 17, 9.5, 8, and 7.5. The opposite evidence was found among students with the lowest scores. They seem to overestimate themselves in self-assessment. Let's see here. Student 5 got 3 in written tests, 6.5 in oral presentation, and self-assessment decided to get a 9. Okay. Student 7, 5.5, 7.5, and self-assessment 8. And student 10, 5.5, 7, and 8.5. Our conclusion suggests that, our work suggests that students have positive views on self-assessment in English class and believe it can help their learning. However, comparisons between self-assessment and the written test scores showed significant difference. Comparisons between self-assessment and oral presentation scores also showed significant difference. In addition, results suggest that some students overestimate themselves in both self-assessment tools, mainly those students with low scores in achievement tests. Although self-assessment can help students and teachers, our work showed that it should be used with other tools, with other assessment tools. And to finish our reference. Thank you very much.
Okay, so thank you very much, Eliana and Sandra. Let's see if we have any questions from the audience. So welcome, Sandra. Nice. Okay, so we have a question from Gladys Quevedo. So very interesting, thank you. In your view, what were the main lessons you learned during this study that could be extended to other learning contexts? Nice, thank you so much, Gladys.
Yes, hello. Thanks, Gladys, for your question. Well, I think this was this research. In fact, I supervised this research as a postdoctoral study. Eliana took with me, and I think that this study shows that another way of using self-assessment, in fact, because many teachers, yes, use self-assessment as in the developing perspective. I myself usually use the self-assessment in the developing perspective, trying to help students to understand their process of learning, the way what they can do to improve their learning, to correct something in the process. And this study shows that you can use it in a different perspective. I thought it was very interesting. At first, I didn't agree with grading self-assessment, yes, with this view of grading. But at the end, I enjoyed the results because it's not the grade itself. It's not a grade that the student gives himself or herself in order to add that grade to the teacher's grade. Yes, so that it can change a lot the final mark, but it shows that the student can take part, can be engaged in the assessment process, and that and it also shows that these differences she found at the end. So, for example, students who usually take a lower grade in the achievement test try to evaluate themselves with higher grades, and the opposite is also true. Yeah, so I think not because of the grade, but because of the process, for the student to recognize that sometimes a little more attention is necessary for the process to take place, to occur. And so I think this is very interesting for teachers to talk to their students and to understand what happens in this process when using self-assessment, what self-assessments are for, and how they can help the process of learning and assessing languages, I think.
Nice. Thank you very much, Sandra.